This episode of Dana Being Dana is brought to you in part by the Wright Center for Women's Health, providing personalized luxury health care.
Hello and welcome to Dana Being Dana. That's me, and I'm thrilled you're with us. My show is about all different aspects of the human connection, things that bring us together, and living life intentionally. Life events, such as the holidays and anniversaries, often trigger anxiety and depression for many people. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the U.S., affecting 40 million adults in the United States age 18 and older, or 18.1% of the population every year. Depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. Major depressive disorder affecting approximately 17.3 million American adults in a given year. Nearly 50% of all people diagnosed with depression are also diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. Here with me are my friends Tracy, Adam, and Jessica. How are you all?
Good.
Thank you so much for joining me to have this conversation. Adam, you're a therapist, and you specialize in talking to and treating patients with anxiety and depression, right?
Correct.
So what does anxiety look like? Let's start with that. And what are the symptoms?
So first of all, there's a couple of different types of anxiety, like as people would typically refer to in a clinical setting. One would be social anxiety, one would be generalized anxiety, one would be phobias, and then another one would be panic disorders. And they all have a lot in common. Starting with social, and I guess I could bundle in generalized as well, it's essentially a situation where you have, I want to say, an irrational emotional reaction to a life event where you actually think that your life hangs in the balance and that there is a massive amount of embarrassment that could be waiting for you if you were to go through with that certain thing. Social anxiety is very much about that. It's about feeling accepted by other people. It's about feeling comfortable being self. And in a major way, the individual is really trying to protect who they are in terms of what do other people want to see and trying to fit in with them. And so it invokes a fight or flight response. And that is pretty consistent across the board with all types of anxieties. Panic disorder and social anxiety go very much hand in hand. As emotions become heightened, it can lead to panic. I mean, shortness of breath. So if we're talking about symptoms, shortness of breath, heart palpitations, sweating. If we're talking about social anxiety, avoidance of those social situations, coming up basically at a loss for words when trying to communicate with other people. Essentially, we're multitasking in those situations. We're trying to give people what they want to be accepted, and then at the same time, we're trying to figure out, are they receiving what we're trying to give them?
You talked about life events, Adam, when it comes to anxiety. Tracy, you've experienced some life events that have triggered anxiety for you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. One of the biggest life experiences for me was when I was 14 and I lost my mother suddenly to a cerebral brain hemorrhage. And the lack of being able to cope with that loss threw me into a world of anxiety that I wasn't aware of. So I would do things like try to spend more money. I wasn't able to sleep. I did have some panic attacks. And over the years, I really didn't, the lack of grief was inhibited into that anxiety. So for me, as I got older, I started shopping more, spending more money. Then my thoughts started to ruminate, whereas, the anxiety and the worry, everything that I could not control became more anxiety for me.
Losing somebody so close to you, so suddenly, so unexpectedly, keeps you focused on the future. What's going to happen next? Will somebody else die suddenly, or not knowing what's unexpected? That's what anxiety is the fear of the future, or the fear of what's unexpected. And then what?
Well, with that, what you just said with the fear of the future is the fact that you can't change anything that you thought you could change. So the death of my mother, not being able to change that situation to make it different, probably subconsciously started a lot of my anxiety and just carried with me throughout my life. And then as I've gotten older, I learned to manage it, but I recognize it. And then when I got married and my husband got sick, and then it kind of started again because once again I couldn't control that situation. So the anxiety just built up, but I also realized it a lot more as I got older than I did when I was a teenager.
So let's talk about depression. Adam, what are the symptoms of depression? Tell us what that looks like.
Yeah, so depression, so first of all, I can give you like, not necessarily symptoms, but like descriptors, I guess, of what to look for. Lack of motivation, feeling helpless, expecting that the situation today that they are in the dark place that they may be in, is going to continue for the rest of their life. In general, despair, isolation would be a handful of others. And if we're talking about specific things to look for in an individual, in addition to those, it would be appetite, it would be like a significant decrease, it would be sleep, decreased energy and motivation to do things, like I said before, challenges with focus, and then even to the point with, suicidal thoughts or contemplating, the pain that I'm having today with what I have to deal with would be so much easier if I did not exist. And so a lot of people will say this, there's not an intent to do something to harm themselves, but the idea is my pain is so great that I would almost do anything to have it go away.
It's insurmountable.
Correct.
Yeah. Jessica, how old were you when you experienced your first depression episode?
So the first time I could ever remember being depressed, I was 8, and it took me by surprise because I had a pretty happy childhood. So life revolved around family. I had a lot of cousins. You were always doing stuff as a family. And I remember one day we were going to school and I just had this like aching emptiness within me, and I was 8 years old and I was like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? We're gonna like go to school, work, live 70 years and die? I was like, is this meaningless? I felt like this, really this despair. It was really deep and profound, and then it lasted for like a few moments and then it was gone. And that's what I remember. But according to my mom, she says that when I was 3 and my grandparents, they would go away for the winter because it's freezing in Chicago, I didn't understand that they were just going to be gone temporarily. And she says that I didn't eat or speak for 3 weeks.
Wow, at 3 years old.
At 3 years old, yeah. And she said she took me to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician got me to drink water and begged me to drink water. And she said she's upset, and it didn't really know much about that kind of stuff in the 80s.
Right.
So she was just like, she's upset, and I think my mom took me to see Big Bird or something, and she said I had no reaction to Sesame Street and Big Bird.
Missing your grandparents.
Yeah.
Are men and women impacted differently when it comes to anxiety or depression?
I'm going to stick to the biological answer for that one and the way that the brains are made up and the difference between the female brain and the male brain. Actually, believe it or not, and there's statistics that support this, there's a lot of research behind it. Women are, unfortunately, more susceptible to both anxiety and depression in comparison to men. There's a handful of reasons, and some of them are speculative, and some of them are actually scientifically proven. The first one is the fight or flight response that we get when we're in an uncomfortable and an anxious situation is actually, the onset of it is earlier for the female, and it sticks around longer. The second is the amount of serotonin in the brain, and this is research that's still ongoing, might be lower in females than it is for males. And this is also known as like the happiness chemical. It's the
Less happiness.
Well, I don't want to go
Maybe these men are stressing us out.
And you know what? Oh man, here we go. See, this is why I was going to tread lightly and stick to biology, but it still went there.
There you go. Here we go. We went.
It still went there. But look, you also have the female brain develops more rapidly than the male brain. During that period, I would say females, if we're talking about adolescence, there's a lot happening during that period of life with environments changing. That's one of the reasons depression and anxiety, I guess 2 of them, that they are higher is, serotonin we need.
Right.
And so when we talk about medication later, that's kind of part of it. But it's something that, there is a factor, and then seeking treatment's a whole nother story.
Well, everybody experiences some form of anxiety or depression throughout their life. Life happens. You apply to college, you have anxiety, you have a first date, new job. There's so many different things in life that trigger anxiety and depression. When you're anticipating good news, there is anxiety surrounding that. Will she say yes to my proposal? You're on your wedding date. Will that happen? And there's also, things that trigger depression. Not getting into that first choice, being stood up at your wedding, breaking up with a friend or a loved one, or losing somebody. When does the line cross between normal depression and anxiety and abnormal depression and anxiety? And did either of you know when you experienced those in your own life that things had crossed a certain line?
Well, I would say, I mean, as a young teenager, you don't recognize that anxiety is anxiety. I think as I've gotten older, well, even through my 20s, I didn't really start recognizing the anxiety until I was probably early 30s, just because I started counseling at that time. And then I was diagnosed with OCD, and I had to go on Zoloft, and a lot of that allowed me to recognize that I did have an issue with anxiety, which kind of created other problems for me. So I think now that I'm, 50, I've gotten older, I know when I'm about to be in an anxious mode compared to just the basic worry. I'll lose sleep, I'll have the heart palpitations, I'll have ruminating thoughts, I'll just, play a scenario over and over and over again in my brain, and then I'll at some point decide, okay, I have to stop doing this. And that's when I have to recognize that the anxiety is controlling me.
Well, for me, so I was born with bipolar disorder, and I wasn't diagnosed with bipolar 2 until I was 18, but that's actually kind of early compared to some people can go, decades. But you don't know that something isn't what everybody else experiences, right? So like when I was, the first moment I ever got depressed that I remember when I was 8, so they were just really brief moments in my childhood. And then when I was a teenager, I had no vocabulary, like you were saying. How would you know that's anxiety? How would I know what that's depression? How do I know that? How do I know that not other 10-year-olds worry about the meaning of life? I don't know that. And then when I was a teenager, those moments where I was a highly motivated person, all of a sudden I'd feel like no motivation, like what you were talking about. And I'd have to force myself. I'd go through crying spells, and especially in the winter. And then alternately, I'd just be genuinely happy and stable for no reason at all. Or what I now know is hypomania. It would take me like 5-6 hours to go to sleep. And I was very artistic, and I didn't know it wasn't normal for people to take 5-6 hours to go to sleep until I went to college. And then I saw people went to sleep when they wanted to sleep. And I was like, oh, this is like a revelation. People don't, not everybody. So, I'd asked my parents for help my senior year of high school, and I only knew the word depression. Like I didn't know any other mental health lingo. And they'd asked our pastor at the time for help, not because he was a pastor, but because he also happened to be a doctor. But he wasn't a psychiatrist, and so that's something people should keep in mind. Just because somebody's a doctor doesn't mean they have the answers. And so he's like, oh, this is just teenage angst, this will go away. And then when I was a freshman in college, I lost a friend of mine who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder to suicide. And so it was just like an epiphany, like a light bulb went on in my head. We had a lot of the same symptoms, and she understood me, and I researched the illness, and I saw the campus mental health center, which is where they diagnosed me.
Adam, when do you know when you're dealing with clients, when someone is...
They've kind of crossed the line between...
Correct.
So, first of all, I think anxiety actually, like the normal manageable piece of anxiety, is actually something that serves us well. It helps us, let's say we've got an exam coming up. It helps us prepare for it. We're not going to come into it blind because we're anxious about how we're going to perform, assuming we care. Whether it's, proposal, we want to do it right. I don't know, just a host of different things that anxiety actually makes sure that we're going to deliver what we would like to. Now, when it gets excessive is when it starts to impact truly the quality of life that we're having. We don't engage in the activities that we really enjoy. It affects how much we socialize. It affects how we perform at work or at school.
It impacts the outlook on life.
100%.
Yeah.
And, I think it's a really great point of, what is this, anxiety, like the definition of it. And I think most people, they feel, many people feel it, but they don't quite know what it is, and they accept this is my normal. This is part of who I am. And if you have social anxiety, going and talking to somebody is one of the most excruciating, painful thoughts that they could possibly have.
Well, I'm thrilled that you guys are talking to me. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. have been talking about anxiety and depression and how common they are. What's really important to understand is that you are not alone if you're experiencing some of these symptoms. Let's talk about environment. How does your environment contribute to anxiety or depression?
Well, for me, I think growing up, having a lack of support was very instrumental in my anxiety. I think there was not a good support system when my mother died, so I was pretty much left on my own to do what I wanted to do. My father did eventually take me to counseling, but at that time, being a rebellious teenager, I didn't think I needed it. So I think that was his way of showing his support, but I didn't get any real emotional support, and I just pretty much felt like I was alone. And I think that environment had a lot to do with my lack of coping with the anxiety earlier on in my life compared to waiting until I was, late 20s and my early 30s.
Could having parents who suffer from anxiety and depression influence someone growing up in that household?
Oh, absolutely. This goes back to the nature versus nurture argument. And I think in a big way, it's both. On the nurture side of things, like if you do have a parent that's tremendously anxious, especially about certain things, like let's say it's social and they're avoiding all these social situations because it makes them uncomfortable, the kid's going to watch this and going to think, we're a young adult, and going to think like, okay, like these are scary situations.
That's the new normal.
This is the new normal. And then, if you think about like, okay, fight or flight response and resilience, also we're learning that almost indirectly. And so, as younger people, we are watching the environment that we're in, especially as we're so impressionable and our brain's developing, and we internalize a lot of that stuff and carry it with us for quite some time without even knowing where we got it and how it's there and why it's there and how we get rid of it.
Would you say anxiety and depression are hereditary?
It's a really good question because actually I have a friend who is scared to death of having friends because he believes it's almost exclusively hereditary. And there is a lot of evidence to prove, like, yes, genetics do play a role, but also so does brain chemistry, so does personality, so does, again, the environment that you grow up in, and various life events that have affected you over time. So, just a host of different reasons, and, obviously it can be genetic in a major way, but certainly influenced and even made worse based on the environments that we could be in and the life events that we experience.
Speaking of environments, I think anxiety and depression are on the rise in our society. It could be that more people are being diagnosed, but I also think it could be the environment when it comes to technology. How does technology contribute to depression and or anxiety?
Well, I really feel like we need that human interaction. And so, the average person spends 2 hours, 22 minutes a day on social media.
Wow.
That's a huge chunk of your life spent on your phone. And I feel like a lot of young people, so I coach high school debate, and so I knew a world before Facebook. Now some of these people, they never knew a world before Facebook. And so it's like, we're on, but are we connected? We need that connection. So it's like, are you constantly on, but not connected to other people? And there are people who do find genuine connection in social media. So I'm not saying that it's not possible, but I think if you're not conscious while you're doing it, you can fall into that trap.
What is social media depression?
I don't know that from a diagnosis perspective that there's actually a word that, but I would say like, it's actually interesting. I see people, social media, like usually there's something already there, okay? So social media, like obviously we go there and sometimes we're looking for validation and we're not getting it. We often see how other people are living and they're only posting the great things, that they've done, over the course of, the week, the day, whatever it is. And
so we're not computing.
Never the negative stuff.
Yeah, we're not computing that they have bad moments. They're just not posting them.
Yeah, and it's, the person's comparing, like, why don't I have a life like this, number one. And then, if we're not just talking about Facebook, it's the idea of being excluded now is a major piece, especially among young people where you can literally eviscerate somebody's, status socially. Click.
With a click.
Yeah. And I tell people, because I've had friends who felt like, oh, I'm behind the curve because they're logged on to Facebook and everything's like great. And I said, Facebook is it's like the greatest hits of a person's life. So most people are going to share the greatest things that ever happened in their life on Facebook, but they're going to hide the other stuff. And so I say, just take it with a grain of salt. Don't ever compare yourself on your worst day to someone else on their best day.
There's always a story behind all the glory.
Right.
So we've talked about all of these symptoms of anxiety and depression. If you're predisposed to anxiety and depression, what can you do to keep the symptoms at bay? How are these treated?
I would say one of the biggest ones, like from the onset, is knowing that you need to cope. Like you may need to cope.
So acknowledging.
Yes, it starts with the
there's an
emotional
issue.
awareness that one, this is something that I am dealing with. This is something that I carry around, and not ignoring it, but being aware of it when it comes, so that we can do something about it. I'll often recommend that the individual's taking care of themselves and doing things that they enjoy. Exercise, diet, eating right, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like doing things that they find fulfilling, and I think that's very much part of self-care. I do think therapy is a part of it. I do think medication could potentially be a part of it. It depends on the individual.
So it can be a combination of several different things. Like you said, exercise, diet, therapy, medication, sleep. I've heard spiritual grounding.
Support for sure.
Definitely.
The support.
Absolutely.
I feel like everybody should know their top 5. So if you're predisposed to, someone with bipolar, I'm watching out for depression. I know what my top 5 are because I use mood tracker apps, and there's like mental health apps that can help you with
There's great
anxiety
ones,
or
yeah.
depression or bipolar. And so from using the apps, I learned what triggers depression, but also how to like proactively handle. So like my top 5 things, if I start to see I'm depressed on my app, it's like exercise, which you mentioned, shower, light therapy, staring at a box of light, literally that. And I listen to, it's related to faith, but like black gospel music, just specifically that genre.
Yes,
is
honey.
uplifting.
Amen.
and then watch Days of Our Lives. So this is my top 5. It's from shower to all the way around. Like you got to know yourself, because if you're not like intentional about the coping mechanisms, it can slip away from you.
It's true. To each his own, because for me, I listen to all kinds of music when I'm feeling depressed or sad, even when I'm happy. I think the support is important. I think talking to a therapist, I talked to a therapist when I lost my dad, when I got divorced. I think it's important just to even have friends. Sometimes it's just getting it out and just that communication, which is so, so important. So what are some healthy coping mechanisms versus unhealthy coping mechanisms?
Well, for me, it's changing a thought when I realize it's a negative thought. And I think that has been something that takes a lot of practice, but it is a great way to try to change how I think about things so I don't get anxious. Walking, again, exercise, walking helps me clear my mind. So that goes hand in hand with the changing my thoughts. So for me, those are great coping things that I do. I haven't gotten to the exercise part as much as I need to be, but I mean, fully exercising outside of walking. But I think to begin a process of starting slow, if you have to kind of work your way up and find what works best for you, because a lot of times exercise for some people may not be the best way to cope, but you kind of have to develop your own top 5 to find out what works. Yeah, you do.
The trial and error. Let's talk a little bit about therapy, because I think there's a lot of people who don't feel like they have someone that they can talk to and trust. Even people who are seemingly popular or have a lot of friends, either on social media or otherwise, at the end of the day, often feel alone. So I want to talk a little bit about therapy. Adam, you're a therapist. How do you know when and you guys may have seen therapists in your time, how do you know when a therapist is a good match, or what advice do you have for somebody in finding a therapist?
One way that therapy helped me in the past was she helped me identify the cognitive distortions I was most prone to. So these are patterns of thinking that they're so a part of us. It's hard to know that we're trapped in them. So like black and white thinking, I remember one time I told my therapist, I said, I want to exercise because exercise has helped me when I'm depressed, but I'm too depressed to do 30 minutes of exercise. I was like, I can't do it, but I want to exercise so I could get out of the depression. And she said to me, because I was steeped in black and white thinking, it was all or nothing, and she's like, you don't have to do 30 minutes. You just try to do 10 minutes. And so then after that, I was aiming for 10 minutes, and 10 became 20 and 30, and that has really helped me.
For me, it was important to find a therapist who was of similar demographics. So I wanted a female, I wanted an African American female. And I'm currently in therapy, so it works for me to have her because, number one, she's giving me assignments to complete that work well with my anxiety and other things, and then she calls me out on some things that I don't recognize for myself as we talk. And I think that's very important for me because I can talk and talk and talk through a therapy session, but she needs to stop me and tell me what she's hearing and what she wants me to focus on, and that works for me.
Is it a quick fix, Adam? Do your clients come in and out? I mean, I know you're good.
Thank you for the vote of confidence.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'll give you your tip after the show. But one of the things that I'll tell individuals or or parents of young people that come in and are expecting a quick fix, it's usually I'll say, how long have you or this individual been dealing with this challenge?
Right.
And usually the answer is, like I would say, most people wait till the 30s to really get help. I don't know if that was one of the statistics, but it is one.
Yeah.
They wait until the 30s to get help. And so it's, how can we possibly expect from 8 sessions, like even 12, and even to a more significant level, how we're going to resolve these deeply rooted challenges in such a short period of time? It's just not realistic. It's not a therapist dragging you along. They're trying to meet you where you're at, and that's where you're at.
Yeah, and I think it takes a while to unpack that stuff.
Oh my gosh, and
But
that person to feel comfortable
Yeah.
and trusting for that rapport to be built. And in certain cases, if, let's say, a client of mine is okay with it, being able to be direct and hold them accountable.
Do you see a difference in people who jump in with and are receptive to therapy, really making significant changes in their lives, accepting feedback, being called out and responding to that in a positive way? Do you see that change their quality of life?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it happens so much quicker. One of the things that impedes the progress of therapy in a major way is how invested is that person really in their own change? Are they ready to work hard? Because it's not going to be comfortable. And one of the things I tell people is, we're going to have to go to some places that are not comfortable for you. I can assure you they're going to be productive. Are you ready for that? And so some people, I would say I get a lot of yeses, and then some people, I still need some time to make sure, this is really what I want to do, and I want to fight the battle.
Are you ready to do the work?
Yeah.
What signs of anxiety and depression should you look for in family or friends? At the end of the day, we want to help people, and I want people to know what to look out for.
I mean, for me, it's looking for an aberration in behavior or an abrupt change. So, well, for example, being a coach, if I have a student who, I've had this happen a few times, they're doing really well in school, they're getting straight A's, top of the class, and then they start getting D's or not showing up. Usually it's a mental health problem, like 99.9% of the time. It's just never been somebody was like, I just decided to change my whole personality overnight. Or if I have a friend who's very sociable and then they don't want to go out. They don't want to interact with people. They're not picking up the phone. They're isolating. And then, I think it's just knowing a person before you can notice the changes.
Not being afraid to say something.
Yeah.
Speaking up.
For me, I noticed that my daughter had some anxiety, and maybe this goes back to the whole hereditary thing, but I think for me, I noticed that she was her friendships were changing, and I could tell she was being bothered by that. And I would ask her certain things, she would be very vague. So she wasn't very informative to me, but I noticed the change in how she responded when I asked about it, and I did put her in therapy for that reason.
Good. You took action.
That's
I
really
did.
good.
That's good.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you all for joining me for this important discussion. I want to try to help as many people as we can, so I thank you for your time. Many people live in fear of the stigma or judgment around anxiety and depression, and that is no way to live. Everyone needs support from time to time to manage and process life events, especially those that are unexpected. You owe it to yourself and those you love to get the support that you need to fully walk in your purpose and live your best life. Hopefully you have been entertained, if not encouraged or inspired. I do not promise to be an expert, nor do I have all of the answers. I'm just Dana, being Dana. See you next time.